Hi everybody, welcome again to Life, Loss and Hope. Thank you for joining us. Please continue to like, to share and subscribe and leave your comments. Today I'm talking about what we do with our loved ones' possessions after they die. Not to give you any specific advice, but to openly share some of the dilemmas that go on in our minds and with other people who are well-meaningly wanting to help us to move forward. It seems to be a thorny question that I am often asked and that others will ask us when we are grieving. What are you going to do with their things? There's a lot of tradition and ceremony around saying goodbye to a loved one who's died, including their body, but very little when it comes to dealing with their possessions. After the funeral service and initial practicalities of essential legal requirements and paperwork, you will still have your loved one's belongings, clothes and personal effects around you, especially if you're a family member. It can be hugely emotional and often very stressful when other people ask what we're going to do, or even presume that we want to sort out their things, or indeed that we have already done so. From supporting many bereaved people over the years, there are some observations that I've made. It is relatively common that this very personal subject of our loved one's belonging crops up at still a very raw time when the upheaval and devastation of the loss is all-encompassing. It can bring an enormous amount of pressure to do something, shame if you haven't, guilt if you have, and if it hasn't crossed your mind yet, perhaps self-doubt, a feeling like you're going crazy or that you're failing or abnormal. People who are grieving often have to deal with, at best, unwanted questions or at worst advice that they haven't asked for, and from perhaps people who haven't walked their path or even experienced a loss. Many bereaved people have asked me too, when's the right time to start sorting out their loved ones' things? Often there is a subtle or even overt pressure from those around us to begin this process. And I heard someone say the other day that they had only been asked months after their wife had died, how did you feel when you got rid of her stuff? It was a massive presumption that had been made, and in fact he'd not even thought about it, and he found that very distressing and awkward to answer. It is a struggle to get out of bed and do normal things for so many people in early grief that they probably haven't even contemplated this alien question. Like all things in grief, there's no broad brush generalizations of how to feel or respond to sorting out your loved one's possessions after death. Remember that your grief is as unique as your fingerprint, and everyone has their own way of coping. There is certainly no right or wrong time or way to approach this subject. What I've noticed is that often friends and family seem more concerned about it and therefore will bring it up. Perhaps there has to be some immediate considerations like hospital equipment or unused medications that need to be removed, or there are practical space issues in a home. What I've noticed as well is that the grieving person, if they've not mentioned this subject, it is usually because they haven't even considered it yet, or that they are choosing to keep everything the way that it was. And that's absolutely fine. It's your choice and it reflects what you feel most comfortable, secure, and deeply connected to having your loved one's things around you. Everything they touched, used, and wore are not just things. They represent their presence, their being, and the very essence of that person you're missing so much. In early grief, it can be overwhelmingly reassuring to have yourself surrounded by your loved one's things. After all, those are the physical things that remain, a part of them and your life together, and they represent a bond and a connection to them. Sadly, I've heard some very unhelpful reactions to this situation. Comments like, his house is like a museum to his late wife, or perhaps you're in denial, or you're stuck in grief, or that you'll never move on, or I've heard it say they keep their son's bedroom like a shrine. Sadly, society is very grief illiterate, and those examples that I've heard said to people are unkind, judgmental, lacking in empathy, and can leave the griever feeling isolated, angry, shameful, and like they're going crazy. None of these are true. You are grieving, and when you are ready, you may begin to consider what to do and then make steps to make change. Dealing with unwanted advice can also be tough, so perhaps be prepared with some thoughts or responses ahead of time so that you don't crumple in tears, get angry, or feel awkward. You could say to someone, "It's important for me to do things in my own time, and at the moment it helps me to leave everything as it was." Or you could even tell them, "I haven't thought about that yet. I'm not ready to, and I'll tell you when I am." If you are given unwanted advice, it isn't even rude to say, "We all deal with grief differently, and if you have experienced loss, you dealt with it your way, and I'm doing things in my way." And if somebody hasn't experienced loss, they don't understand and they don't know. It may make you feel angry and upset at the time, and that's normal. I sometimes look back on how I perceived grief and loss before I experienced it, at my own lack of understanding and empathy. And after all, you don't know what you don't know. There are people who give things away and clear their loved ones' possessions very quickly after their passing. Our coping strategies are all different, and for some it's much more painful to be surrounded by constant reminders. And if that's you, that's okay too. That doesn't mean that you're being harsh, that you don't care, or that you are sweeping them out of your life. It's your way of dealing with the situation. The only thing to consider is that if you do give away things quickly, you may change your mind later. Grief can make us impulsive, and once things are gone, that's permanent. So if perhaps you don't want to see things, it may be good to put them away in a garage or a room until you are really sure. It can be tricky in a family home as well when two or more people have different ways of wanting to do things. When I worked at the hospice after a baby's death, the husband rushed home and took down the baby's cot in the nursery that they'd prepared and removed all the items that they'd bought in anticipation of this new life. When his wife got home, she was totally distraught to see it all gone. Her husband had thought he was being helpful and kind to protect her from the pain of seeing the empty cot. But in reality, she needed those things around her for some time as she processed the vacuum of loss. Communication is key, and in this case the cot was reassembled and the clothes put back, and they both took comfort together in the nursery, which marked their baby's life until they were both ready to make changes. So husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, and all family members will have differing needs in grief. Try not to make assumptions about what is helpful for another person. You could talk to each other without judging, to find compromises where necessary and respect each other's needs. This will minimise additional conflict and heartache at an already traumatic time. So communication is really necessary. Often things like clothing can feel hard to part with, although logically you may know it would be good to donate them to charity or give things away to friends and family. And perhaps you may aim to do that eventually, but so many people feel like they can't part with any of it. I've heard it described like it's giving them away, a sense of losing them again. Everything they touched was precious and holds valuable memories. Some final thoughts. Firstly, if you do want to, start sorting things in your own time. But wait till you're ready, really ready. Don't be rushed or coerced or let anyone else decide the timing or what you keep or give away. Remember, it's your time and your choice. Secondly, you could start in small steps. Start slowly by sorting things through that have the least emotional attachment, and then move on to the harder stuff when you feel ready to. You may want to give family and friends some personal items, as it's important to remember that it's their loss too, And then there may be other items you want to donate to a favoured charity that you support or that was connected to your loved one's life. Taking small steps and doing a little at a time can make it just that little less painful. Maybe start with half a wardrobe or a few drawers. Give yourself credit that you have courageously decided to start the process of life going forward. You may want to do this alone or with a friend or family member who you trust and understands. And be prepared for tears and painful moments as you do this. That's to be expected. And if you need to stop, just do so until you can resume things. Be kind and gentle on yourself. And you may want to display treasured items. There are lots of creative ways to capture the life and essence of your loved one by using things like fabric squares from their favourite clothes to make a quilt, a cushion or a pillowcase. Clothes hold memories and scents which can be so comforting. You may want to display special items, ornaments, mementos from holidays in a cabinet or a shelving unit so that you and others can see them, thus making it part of your everyday life. Or you could collate photos in a big frame and hang them on the wall or in a photo book. I have kept sympathy cards and letters for years in a special box. Something I really treasure. It reminds me of the love poured out in the aftermath and that their life mattered and still does. Eventually for me, when I was ready to make changes and sort things out, it was another painful letting go, but it also felt like a weight had been lifted. Naturally and understandably, I needed to have my loved one's possessions around me as a way to feel closer to them. But as time passed, I could feel that closeness in so many other ways, all the time, in my heart, in nature, in memories, and somehow the sorting and letting go was helpful to embrace another step of the healing process. Thank you for listening. We share the journey together.